When a young progressive bakery clerk demanded a Republican customer remove his MAGA hat or leave, she never expected him to reveal he owned the establishment. Her impulsive stance against hate symbols sparked a confrontation that would reshape both their perspectives on tolerance and respect. Thomas Richardson stood outside his establishment on a crisp autumn morning, adjusting the red MAGA hat he'd worn to countless rallies and community events. After 20 years of building Cherrybrook Bakery into the most successful shop in town, he still liked to drop by unannounced to ensure everything ran smoothly. Today, he'd heard concerning reports about a new employee's treatment of conservative customers. Through the storefront windows, he could see Sarah Miller, the clerk in question, arranging fresh pastries in the display case. She'd been hired 2 months ago and came highly recommended for her customer service skills. But lately, several regular customers had complained about her cold shoulder treatment when they wore anything suggesting Republican views. Thomas took a deep breath, straightening his casual polo shirt and khakis. At 54, he'd weathered plenty of political storms in this mixed suburban community. He believed in addressing problems head-on, but always with patience and respect. The security cameras were rolling as usual, and the morning rush meant plenty of witnesses would be present. Perfect conditions to observe how Sarah really handled customers she disagreed with. The bell chimed as he pushed open the door, joining the line of customers waiting for their morning coffee and pastries. Sarah's shoulders visibly tensed when she spotted his hat, her movements becoming sharp and jerky as she slammed the display case shut. Several customers glanced between them, picking up on the sudden shift in atmosphere. "I can't believe they let people wear that hate symbol in here," Sarah muttered loudly to her co-worker, who quickly stepped away looking uncomfortable. Thomas maintained a neutral expression as he approached the counter, noting how Sarah's face had flushed red with barely contained anger. He'd seen that look before, the righteous certainty of someone about to make a very public stand. "Welcome to Cherrybrook," Sarah said through clenched teeth, her customer service smile more of a grimace. "Will you please remove that hat before ordering? We don't allow hate symbols in this establishment." The other customers fell silent, several already pulling out phones to record what was clearly about to become a scene. Thomas felt their eyes on him as he calmly placed his hands on the counter. "I'm curious," he said mildly. "Who exactly made that policy?" Sarah's face contorted with indignation as she stepped out from behind the counter, her name tag glinting under the bakery's warm lighting. "I made that policy," she declared loudly, ensuring other customers could hear. "We have a responsibility to create safe spaces, and that hat represents everything that's wrong with this country." Several customers raised their phones higher, sensing the confrontation escalating. Thomas remained perfectly still, his hands still resting on the counter as Sarah moved closer, jabbing her finger toward his hat. "You MAGA people are all the same," she continued, her voice rising. "You come in here spreading your hate and intolerance, making everyone uncomfortable. Well, I won't stand for it anymore. This is my workplace, and I'm telling you to leave." Thomas tilted his head slightly, maintaining eye contact. "I'd like to understand what specifically about me has made anyone uncomfortable. I've been standing here quite calmly." "Oh, don't play innocent." Sarah's cheeks flushed deeper red. "That hat means you support putting kids in cages, destroying women's rights, and oppressing minorities. You're part of the problem. I've seen all your type's hateful posts on social media." Behind Sarah, her co-worker Jenny slowly backed away toward the kitchen, throwing apologetic glances at the growing line of customers. The morning rush crowd pressed against the walls, creating a semicircle around the confrontation. "Those are quite serious accusations," Thomas replied evenly, pulling out his phone. "Would you mind if I record this conversation, since you're making public statements about my character?" "Record all you want. I'm not afraid to stand up to fascists." Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for her own phone. In fact, I'm calling the police if you don't leave right now. We have the right to refuse service to anyone." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "You're correct about the right to refuse service. However, I'm curious about your training regarding Cherrybrook's actual customer service policies." "I don't need special training to recognize hate symbols," Sarah scoffed, typing furiously on her phone. "Everyone knows what that hat means. You're probably some privileged white male who's never faced discrimination in his life." The whispers among the customers grew louder, several shaking their heads at Sarah's behavior. One elderly woman near the door muttered, "That's not how you talk to customers, dear." "I understand you feel strongly about this," Thomas said, his voice remaining steady. "But perhaps we could discuss this more professionally. You seem to be making a lot of assumptions about me without—" "I don't negotiate with MAGA supporters," Sarah interrupted, her voice cracking with emotion. "Either remove that hat or leave. Those are your only options in my bakery." Thomas raised an eyebrow at her choice of words. "Your bakery?" he asked quietly, reaching slowly into his back pocket for his wallet. The security cameras whirred quietly overhead, capturing every moment of Sarah's increasingly aggressive stance and Thomas's composed responses. The morning sun streamed through the front windows, illuminating the scene like a stage, with Sarah's righteous anger about to collide head-on with a reality she never saw coming. Thomas pulled out his business card and placed it gently on the counter. Sarah's eyes widened as she read, "Thomas Bennett, owner, Cherrybrook Bakery," embossed in elegant script. "This is my bakery," Thomas said quietly. "And while I respect your right to your political views, you don't have the authority to create policies or refuse service based on customers' political expressions." Sarah's mouth opened and closed several times before she found her voice. This just proves my point," she sputtered, her phone still recording. "Another privileged white man using his position of power to promote hate. You probably inherited this place from your father, didn't you?" Thomas maintained his composed demeanor, as several customers murmured in disapproval of Sarah's accusation. "Actually, I built this business from scratch, after serving in the Peace Corps. But that's not relevant to your behavior right now." "I'm not backing down," Sarah declared, stepping back and addressing the crowd. "Everyone needs to know what kind of person owns this place. He's probably been discriminating against minorities in his hiring practices." She frantically typed on her phone, likely posting to social media. Jenny, the other employee, stepped forward hesitantly. "Actually, Sarah, Mr. Bennett gave me this job when nobody else would hire a single mom. He even adjusted my schedule around my daughter's school hours." "He's just trying to look good," Sarah's voice cracked as she spun around. "You're all falling for his act." She lifted her phone higher, still recording. "This is going viral. Everyone's going to see how MAGA supporters infiltrate local businesses." Thomas gestured toward his office. "Sarah, let's discuss this privately and professionally. This isn't appropriate workplace behavior." "No way. I'm not going anywhere alone with you." She backed away, bumping into the pastry display. "I quit. I won't work for someone who promotes hatred and oppression." "That's your choice," Thomas replied calmly, "but I'd still like to have a professional conversation about this." An elderly regular customer stepped forward, coffee cup in hand. "Young lady, I've been coming here for years. Mr. Bennett has always treated everyone with respect. You're the only one showing intolerance right now." Sarah's face flushed deeper as more customers nodded in agreement. The morning rush line had grown considerably, with people pressed against the walls, phones recording the scene. The security cameras continued their silent vigilance as Sarah's professional meltdown was captured from multiple angles. "You're all part of the problem." Sarah's voice rose to a near shriek. "This is exactly why we need safe spaces. I'm calling corporate right now." "Sarah," Thomas said firmly, "I am corporate. Now, would you like to have a reasonable discussion about workplace expectations, or would you prefer to leave?" Sarah's hands trembled as she fumbled with her phone, switching to live stream mode. Everyone watching needs to see this. The owner of Cherrybrook Bakery is promoting hate symbols right here in our community. Her voice cracked with righteous indignation as she pointed the camera at Thomas's MAGA hat. Two younger employees, Mike and Jessica, emerged from the kitchen area, hovering uncertainly before moving to stand beside Sarah. "We can't just ignore this," Mike declared, though his voice wavered. "It's about creating a safe workspace." The growing crowd of customers pressed against the walls of the bakery, many holding up their phones to record the scene. Through the large front windows, curious onlookers began gathering on the sidewalk, drawn by the commotion inside. "Over 200 viewers already," Sarah announced triumphantly, reading comments off her phone. "Stand your ground. Don't let him intimidate you. See? People understand what's really happening here." Thomas maintained his position behind the counter, hands clasped calmly in front of him. "Sarah, you're disrupting our business operations and making our customers uncomfortable. This isn't about politics anymore. It's about professional conduct." Mrs. Martinez, a regular who ordered wedding cakes for her event planning business, stepped forward from the crowd. "I've worked with Thomas for 5 years. He's donated dozens of cakes to underprivileged families. You're attacking someone who actually helps our community." "He's fooled all of you." Sarah's voice rose higher as she spun to capture Mrs. Martinez on her live stream. "This is classic privileged behavior, doing just enough charity to cover up his real beliefs." The kitchen door swung open as Carl, the head baker, poked his head out. "Orders are piling up," he said quietly. "We've got 3 wedding cakes due today." "See?" Sarah gestured wildly at Carl. "He's using his immigrant workers as shields, probably paying them under the table." Carl's face reddened. "I'm from Wisconsin," he said flatly, "and I make more here than I did at any corporate bakery." A concerned customer near the door spoke into her phone. "Yes, police? There's a situation at Cherrybrook Bakery that's getting out of hand." "The police?" Sarah's eyes widened as she addressed her live stream audience. "Now he's calling the cops on peaceful protesters. This is exactly how privilege works, using the system to silence voices of resistance." "Nobody here called the police," Thomas stated firmly. "But your disruption is affecting our ability to serve customers and fulfill orders. I'm still willing to have a professional discussion about this." Mike and Jessica exchanged uncomfortable glances as the crowd of spectators outside grew larger. Through the windows, a local news van could be seen pulling into the parking lot. Sarah's live stream comment section exploded with activity as the story began spreading across local social media groups. "You can't silence the truth," Sarah declared, her voice hoarse from shouting. "Everyone's going to know what kind of establishment this really is." Through the bakery's front windows, Thomas spotted a group of young activists hurrying across the parking lot, their handmade signs bobbing above their heads. Sarah's live stream had worked faster than anyone expected. The local news van's satellite dish extended skyward as a reporter and cameraman emerged, heading straight for the entrance. "Over 2,000 viewers now," Sarah announced, her voice gaining a theatrical quality as she played to her growing audience. "The people deserve to know about the hate being perpetrated in their own neighborhood bakery." Maria, the senior staff manager, stepped out from the office area. Her 20 years of experience showed in her measured approach as she addressed Sarah. "We need to discuss this in private. We're getting calls from worried customers about their orders." "Private?" Sarah scoffed, turning her phone to capture Maria. "That's exactly what they want, to hide the truth. Anyone who tries to quiet this down is complicit." The bell above the door chimed as Sarah's activist friends entered, their signs bearing hastily written slogans about intolerance and privilege. The news crew followed close behind, equipment at the ready. Thomas straightened his apron, maintaining his professional demeanor. Everyone is welcome in this establishment, regardless of their political beliefs. That's not just policy, it's principle. A principle of oppression, one of the activists shouted, raising their sign higher. Mrs. Martinez had begun recording on her phone, as had several other longtime customers. "I want everyone to see how Thomas is handling this," she declared firmly. "This is what real leadership looks like." Sarah's face flushed with anger. Leadership? He's wearing a symbol of hate. Just last week we made a cake for the LGBTQ Center fundraiser. Was that just for show? "We serve everyone," Thomas repeated calmly. "Republican, Democrat, any race, any orientation. That's not marketing, it's basic human decency." The growing crowd outside pressed against the windows. Inside, the air grew thick with tension as Sarah's activist friends spread out across the bakery, phones recording from multiple angles. Through their live streams, comments poured in from across the city, calling for boycotts and protests. "Your employees deserve better." Sarah gestured to Mike and Jessica, who now looked decidedly uncomfortable. "Tell everyone how you really feel about working under his authority." Mike shifted his weight, glancing between Sarah and Thomas. I just want to do my job," he said quietly. "See? They're afraid to speak up." Sarah's voice cracked with emotion. "This is workplace intimidation." Carl emerged from the kitchen again, flour dusting his apron. "The wedding cakes are at a crucial stage," he announced firmly. "Someone needs to help, or we'll have 3 ruined orders." "Let them fail," one of the activists shouted. "Hit him where it hurts, his profits." Thomas's expression remained steady, though his jaw tightened slightly. "Sarah, your shift ended 10 minutes ago. You're welcome to protest outside, but disrupting our business operations stops now." Thomas's calm refusal seemed to energize Sarah's live stream audience even further. The comment counter on her phone screen ticked upward rapidly, reaching over 5,000 viewers as local activist accounts began sharing clips of the confrontation. "Everyone watching needs to know what kind of establishment this really is," Sarah declared, panning her phone around the bakery. "A place where the owner flaunts symbols of oppression while pretending to be inclusive." Outside, the crowd had swollen to about 20 people, their protest signs visible through the large front windows. Some held phones up to the glass, live streaming their own versions of events. The hashtag Cheddar Boycott Cherrybrook began appearing in bold letters across their screens. Thomas maintained his position behind the counter, MAGA hat still firmly in place. "Sarah, there's a fundamental difference between political expression and hate speech. In my 20 years of running this bakery, we've employed people from all backgrounds and served everyone equally." "That's exactly what people with privilege always say," Sarah shot back, her voice rising. "You can't hide behind fake inclusivity while wearing that hat. It represents everything wrong with the system." Mrs. Martinez stood up from her table, phone steady in her hand as she recorded. "I've been coming here for 15 years. Thomas gave my daughter her first job. He helped fund our local literacy program." "He's buying your silence," one of the protesters shouted through the door. The bakery's phone began ringing incessantly. Maria answered each call, her expression growing more concerned. Regular customers started posting their own stories on social media, defending Thomas and the bakery. Several longtime employees joined in, sharing positive experiences about working there. Sarah's face reddened as she scrolled through her phone. "This isn't over. I'm contacting every progressive organization in the city. You've created a hostile work environment, and there will be consequences." Mike and Jessica exchanged worried glances from behind the display case, their usual cheerful demeanors replaced with obvious discomfort. The division among the staff was becoming apparent as some nodded along with Sarah, while others deliberately turned away. I've documented everything, Sarah continued, her voice taking on a rehearsed quality as she addressed her growing audience. The discrimination, the intimidation, the promotion of far-right ideology in a place of business. My lawyer will be very interested in this footage. Thomas straightened his apron once more, his voice remaining steady. Sarah, you're entitled to your opinions and your right to protest. But making false accusations about discrimination won't change the truth about how we operate here. The news van's camera lights suddenly illuminated the interior of the bakery as the crew set up for their live broadcast. Through the windows, more protesters could be seen arriving, their signs mixing with the phones held high to capture every moment of the unfolding drama. The local social media feeds were already filling with heated debates about tolerance, free speech, and the role of political expression in business. The local news crew's arrival sparked a flurry of activity, both inside and outside the bakery. Sarah's live stream counter jumped to 10,000 viewers as she paced behind the counter, her phone held high to capture every moment. The comment section exploded with divided reactions, some praising her stance against hate symbols, while others began questioning her methods. Breaking news from downtown, announced reporter Lisa Chen, her microphone catching both the growing protest chants and the bell-like chime of the bakery's door as more customers entered. What started as a workplace dispute has evolved into a heated debate about political expression and business owners' rights. Inside, several longtime employees gathered near the kitchen entrance. Maria, who had worked at Cherrybrook for 8 years, stepped forward. "I need to speak up," she said, her voice steady despite Sarah's glare. "Thomas hired me when I barely spoke English. He helped me get my citizenship. Never once has he treated anyone differently because of their beliefs." James, another employee, nodded in agreement. "I'm a registered Democrat, and Thomas knew that when he hired me 3 years ago. We've had respectful political discussions many times." The protest crowd outside swelled to over 50 people, some carrying hastily made signs reading, "No MAGA in our town," and "Hate has no home here." However, a smaller group of counter-protesters began appearing, holding their own phones and recording the scene. Social media detectives quickly went to work. Screenshots of Sarah's previous Twitter posts began circulating, showing a pattern of confrontational behavior. "Just got another racist fired from their job." "Resistance. Cancel," read one post from 2 months ago. Her LinkedIn profile revealed she'd only started at Cherrybrook 3 weeks prior. Mrs. Martinez, still recording everything, pulled up the bakery's hiring records on her tablet. "Look at this," she showed the news crew. In the past 5 years, Thomas has hired people from every political background. The staff Christmas party photos show everyone together, celebrating as a family. The local business association's president, David Wong, arrived on scene and addressed the growing crowd. "We've known Thomas for decades. Cherrybrook Bakery has been a model of inclusive hiring practices and community support. This situation requires careful consideration of facts, not hasty judgment." Sarah's live stream comments began shifting tone as viewers discovered more context. "Wait, she's only worked there 3 weeks?" one comment read. "Maybe we should hear the whole story before grabbing pitchforks." Inside, 2 Muslim employees who had worked the morning shift returned, still in uniform. "We saw what's happening online," Fatima explained to the news crew. "Thomas supported us in wearing our hijabs at work when other places wouldn't. He's always respected everyone's beliefs and rights." The police arrived to maintain order as the crowd grew more animated. Sarah's encouragement of the protesters from inside the bakery began drawing criticism from unexpected sources. Several progressive business owners in the area posted statements distancing themselves from her actions, emphasizing the importance of workplace professionalism regardless of political differences. As the afternoon wore on, Investigative reporter Chen dove deeper into Sarah's employment history. Through public records and interviews with former colleagues, a pattern emerged that made the bakery incident seem less isolated. "We've uncovered multiple workplace incidents at her previous employers," Chen reported, reviewing documents on camera. 3 separate businesses reported similar confrontations where Sarah refused service to customers wearing conservative political merchandise. The bakery's security footage, now under review by management, showed troubling incidents from Sarah's brief employment. The previous week, she had turned away an elderly couple wearing Veterans for Trump shirts, claiming the register was closed. 2 days before that, she'd told a teenage customer to remove his Republican Club hoodie or leave. "I've worked the counter for 6 years," Maria explained to Mrs. Martinez, pointing at the security monitors. "Look here, she's clearly skipping customers wearing anything remotely conservative." The timestamp shows a 15-minute wait for this gentleman in a Reagan shirt while she served everyone else. The bakery's HR department produced documentation of 2 verbal warnings given to Sarah about discussing politics during work hours. "We have a clear policy," explained Helen from HR, showing the employee handbook to the news crew. "Political discussions with customers are prohibited unless initiated by them, and even then, must remain professional." Local business forums lit up with similar stories. "She worked at my cafe last summer," posted Mike Henderson, owner of Downtown Coffee House. "We had to let her go after she started confrontational social media campaigns against regular customers she disagreed with politically." Sarah's own social media history painted a concerning picture. Screenshots circulated of her bragging about making conservatives feel unwelcome at previous jobs. One particularly damaging tweet read, "Another MAGA hat gone. Keep running them out until they learn their views aren't welcome anywhere." Resistance. The local Chamber of Commerce called an emergency meeting to address the situation. "We're deeply concerned about the precedent this sets," stated Chamber President Wong. "Political discrimination of any kind threatens the very fabric of our business community." Thomas's lawyer, Patricia Rodriguez, arrived to review the mounting evidence. "We're looking at clear violations of company policy, customer discrimination, and potentially hostile workplace conditions," she noted, examining the documentation. "The social media posts alone demonstrate a pattern of premeditated discrimination." Regular customers began sharing their own experiences. "I noticed she would roll her eyes whenever I wore my Republican Women's Club pin," said Eleanor Thompson, a weekly patron for 20 years. "Last Tuesday, she claimed they were out of my usual order, but I saw them serving the same item to others." The regional news picked up the story, focusing on the broader implications for business owners and employee rights. Employment law specialists weighed in on the complexities of political expression in the workplace, while business journals analyzed the potential impact on customer relations and company policies. Outside, the protest continued to grow, but the tone had shifted. Several protesters, after seeing the emerging evidence, lowered their signs and stepped away. "I thought this was about standing up to hate," admitted one former protester, Jason Mills. "But it looks more like she was the one spreading intolerance." As the media presence intensified outside Sweet Delight's bakery, news vans from 3 local stations crowded the parking lot. Camera crews positioned themselves strategically, capturing footage of the growing crowd that now included both protesters and counter-protesters. Hand-drawn signs bobbed up and down. "No place for hate," competing with "Protect Business Rights" in a visual representation of the town's division. Sarah emerged from her car, flanked by 2 representatives from Progressive Voice, a local advocacy group. She walked directly to the nearest news crew, her hands shaking slightly as she adjusted her collar. "I'm standing up against the normalization of hate symbols in our workplace," she declared into the microphone, her voice cracking with emotion. "Mr. Harrison has created an environment where conservative customers feel emboldened to intimidate progressive employees. Thomas watched the scene unfold from his office, maintaining his characteristic calm as he organized a folder of documents. When Channel 5's Rebecca Chen requested his response, he stepped outside, dressed in his usual crisp business attire. "I believe the security footage speaks for itself," he stated, gesturing to a laptop where his HR manager had queued up several video clips. "Our policies have always protected both employees and customers from discrimination of any kind." The footage played on live television, showing Sarah's confrontations with various customers over the past month. In one clip, she could be clearly seen pointing to the door when speaking to an elderly man wearing a veteran's cap with a conservative pin. In another, she appeared to deliberately skip over a woman wearing a Republican campaign shirt, serving customers who had arrived after her. Sweet Delights has employed people across the political spectrum for 20 years, Thomas explained, presenting the station with employee records showing diversity in hiring. "We have clear guidelines about political discourse in the workplace." He handed over the employee handbook, opened to the highlighted section on customer interaction policies. Outside, the crowd continued to grow. Local business owners began arriving, many wearing their own business aprons or uniforms in solidarity. "Thomas gave my daughter her first job," said Maria Rodriguez, owner of the Mexican restaurant next door. "He never once asked about her politics, only her work ethic." Sarah's social media activity, now being shared widely in the community, painted an increasingly concerning picture. A recent tweet read, "Time to make conservatives understand they're not welcome in public spaces anymore. Resistance is fertile." Another post showed her bragging about cleaning house at her previous job by driving away right-wing customers. The local business association president, James Chen, arrived to address the situation. "We're calling an emergency meeting tonight," he announced to the gathered media. "This isn't about right versus left. It's about ensuring all community members can access local businesses without fear of discrimination." Police cruisers quietly took up positions around the block as the crowd swelled to over 100 people. Officers maintained a professional distance but kept careful watch as tensions rose between the opposing groups. Social media live streamers weaved through the crowd, their phones held high, broadcasting every development to growing online audiences. Progressive Voice announced plans for a larger protest the following day, promising to bus in supporters from neighboring cities. Their spokesperson handed out flyers describing the bakery as a haven for hate symbols and calling for a complete boycott until Thomas agreed to ban all political attire. Sarah's voice grew more strained with each interview. "He's trying to silence me with corporate policies," she insisted, though her hands trembled as she held up printouts of the employee handbook. "These rules are just tools of oppression designed to protect conservative privilege." Inside the bakery, Thomas's senior staff huddled in the break room, watching the scene unfold on a live stream. Mary, the head baker of 15 years, stood up abruptly. "I've had enough. Those protesters out there don't know the first thing about Thomas or this business." She pulled out her phone and began scrolling through years of photos from company events, holiday parties, and community outreach programs. The local news crews converged on Thomas as he stepped out again, this time accompanied by his diverse management team. Channel 5's Rebecca Chen thrust her microphone forward. "Mr. Harrison, critics say your defense of political symbols creates a hostile work environment. How do you respond?" Thomas maintained his measured tone. "Let me show you something." He gestured to Mary, who approached with her phone gallery ready. These photos span 20 years of Sweet Delight's history. Here's our team serving at the LGBTQ youth shelter. Here we are catering the Republican Women's Leadership Lunch. Our doors have always been open to everyone. Sarah's voice cut through the crowd. "Those are just photo ops." What about the MAGA hat customer who made me feel unsafe? Her progressive voice supporters echoed her complaints, their chants growing louder. A tall man in a police uniform stepped forward. "I was here that day," Officer Rodriguez stated. "I buy my coffee here every morning." The gentleman in question was reading his newspaper quietly when Ms. Chen confronted him. I witnessed the entire interaction. The revelation caused a stir among the media present. Sarah's face flushed as cameras turned toward her. "He was wearing a symbol of hate." "I had every right." "You had no right," interrupted James Chen, the Business Association president. "I've reviewed the security footage from multiple incidents. This wasn't an isolated event, Ms. Chen. You've shown a pattern of discriminating against customers based on perceived political beliefs." Thomas's HR manager stepped forward with a tablet, playing a compilation of security clips showing Sarah's previous confrontations. The footage clearly showed her refusing service to customers wearing various conservative-aligned clothing or accessories, while treating other customers with obvious preferential treatment. Sweet Delights has specific policies about political expression and customer service, Thomas explained, his voice carrying across the now hushed crowd. Every employee signs an agreement to serve all customers equally, regardless of their political beliefs. Ms. Chen violated these policies repeatedly, despite multiple warnings. Several of Sarah's co-workers, initially sympathetic to her cause, began to distance themselves as more evidence emerged. Jenny, a self-described progressive who'd worked the morning shift with Sarah, approached the news crews. "I didn't agree with that customer's politics either, but Sarah was way out of line. She's been trying to turn our bakery into her personal political battleground for months." The progressive voice representatives huddled with Sarah, their expressions growing concerned as more witnesses came forward. Their planned boycott was quickly losing steam as the full context of the situation became clear to the community. Local business owners continued arriving to show support for Thomas, many sharing their own stories of his fairness and professionalism over the years. Police officers began establishing a clearer boundary between protesters and counter-protesters as the crowd's energy shifted. Sarah's social media followers, watching the live stream, started questioning their initial outrage as evidence mounted against their chosen narrative. Thomas watched as local news vans from 3 additional stations pulled into the parking lot, their satellite dishes extending skyward. The media presence had grown from a local story to a regional headline in just hours. Sarah's live stream, still running on her phone, showed a cascade of comments questioning her actions, with many viewers expressing shock at the security footage. "Mr. Harrison," called out Marcus Weber from Channel 7, "we've received reports from multiple former employees about your hiring practices. Could you address allegations that you discriminate against progressive candidates?" Before Thomas could respond, Elena Rodriguez, his Hispanic HR director of 8 years, stepped forward. "I've overseen hiring here since 2015. Our staff includes people from every political background. What matters is their work ethic and customer service skills." She held up a thick folder. "These are our hiring records, showing a completely balanced approach to employment." Sarah's face reddened as her progressive voice supporters began quietly leaving the scene. The security footage, playing on loop on several reporters' tablets, showed her confronting an elderly woman wearing a Veterans for Republicans pin, refusing service to a teenager in a conservative club T-shirt, and making snide comments to customers with American flag accessories. "But what about creating a safe space?" Sarah's voice cracked as she tried to rally her remaining supporters. "We can't just allow hate speech and—" "Excuse me," interrupted a young woman in a Black Lives Matter shirt, stepping out of the bakery. "I've worked here for 3 years. Mr. Harrison supported my college fund, even though he knew I campaigned for Democrats. He's never once made me feel uncomfortable about my views." You're the one who created a hostile environment, Sarah. The local business association's legal counsel arrived, reviewing the mounting evidence. Mr. Harrison, she announced loud enough for the cameras to hear, based on the documentation provided, you have clear grounds for legal action regarding discriminatory practices against customers and violation of company policies. Thomas maintained his composed demeanor despite the growing support. My goal isn't to punish anyone. It's to demonstrate that a business can serve everyone respectfully, regardless of their political beliefs. Sweet Delights has always been a place where different viewpoints can coexist over coffee and conversation. Social media exploded with local customers sharing positive experiences at the bakery. Videos surfaced of Thomas hosting both Democratic and Republican fundraisers, providing equal service and respect to all. The protest signs laying discarded on the sidewalk served as a stark contrast to the growing crowd of community members arriving to show their support for the establishment. Sarah's phone live stream finally cut off as her remaining followers dropped below double digits. The security footage continued to play on news outlets' screens, each clip revealing another instance of her selective discrimination, while Thomas's professional policies stood in sharp relief against her behavior. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot, the scene at Sweet Delights Bakery had transformed into something resembling a media circus. A fourth news van pulled up, its crew rushing to set up equipment as Thomas stood calmly at the entrance, his MAGA hat still firmly in place. The security footage playing on various screens had become a damning chorus of evidence, each replay showing Sarah's pattern of discrimination in crystal-clear detail. "Mr. Harrison," called out Janet Chen from Channel 4, "could you address the social media campaign attempting to label your business as discriminatory?" She thrust her microphone forward, joined by a wall of other reporters. Thomas straightened his tie and spoke with measured clarity. "Sweet Delights has always been, and will always be, a place where everyone is welcome. Political beliefs should never determine whether someone can enjoy a cup of coffee or a fresh pastry. Our doors are open to all who treat others with respect." The crowd's attention shifted as Sarah's attorney arrived, looking increasingly uncomfortable as he reviewed the mounting evidence. The security footage now playing on the local news showed Sarah refusing service to an elderly veteran wearing a Republican pin, while split-screen footage displayed Thomas personally serving at a Democratic fundraiser months earlier. "This isn't about politics," Sarah shouted from her dwindling group of supporters. "It's about standing up to—" "Standing up to what, exactly?" interrupted Marcus Weber, the Channel 7 reporter. "We have documentation of you refusing service to at least 12 customers based solely on their political expression. Meanwhile, we've confirmed Mr. Harrison has hosted events for both major parties and actively supports diverse hiring practices." The business association's legal representative stepped forward, addressing the media. "We've reviewed the evidence thoroughly. Mr. Harrison has documented every incident, maintained clear non-discrimination policies, and demonstrated consistent fair treatment of all customers and employees. The same cannot be said for Ms. Walker's actions." Social media notifications continuously pinged as "Support Cherrybrook" trended locally, then regionally. Former customers shared stories of Thomas's fairness, from the time he catered a Black Lives Matter rally at cost to his annual Veterans Day celebrations, welcoming service members of all political affiliations. "Our civil rights attorneys have reviewed the case," announced Elena Rodriguez, holding up additional documentation. "We have clear evidence of discriminatory practices, but not from Mr. Harrison. The security footage shows systematic targeting of conservatives by Ms. Walker, while Mr. Harrison's business records demonstrate 8 years of inclusive practices." Sarah's live stream viewers had dwindled to single digits as more community members arrived carrying "Support Sweet Delights" signs. The local Interfaith Council released a statement praising the bakery's history of hosting diverse community events, complete with photos showing Thomas serving customers wearing everything from MAGA hats to pride shirts with equal respect and warmth. A young law student in the crowd raised her hand, speaking clearly for the cameras. This isn't about left versus right anymore. It's about professional conduct and equal treatment under the law. Ms. Walker's actions represent exactly the kind of discrimination she claims to be fighting against. Thomas's composed demeanor contrasted sharply with Sarah's increasingly agitated state as more evidence emerged. A former employee stepped forward from the gathered crowd, her hands trembling slightly as she addressed the news cameras. "I worked here for 2 years," said Rebecca Martinez, adjusting her name tag from the coffee shop across the street. Sarah would literally stand by the door and critique customers' political clothing before they even ordered. Meanwhile, Mr. Harrison hired people from every background imaginable. He never once asked about anyone's politics during interviews. The business association's representative, Mr. Chen, unfolded a stack of papers. "We've documented 17 separate incidents where Ms. Walker violated company policy regarding customer service. Here's security footage from last month showing her refusing to serve a woman wearing a conservative church group T-shirt." The footage played on reporters' tablets and phones, spreading rapidly across social media. Sarah's face reddened as she watched her own image pointing aggressively at the elderly customer, demanding she leave the premises. "That's taken out of context," Sarah protested, but her voice wavered as 3 more former co-workers stepped forward. "She made me cry twice during shifts," admitted Jason Torres, still wearing his baker's apron from his new job. "Said my family couldn't be real Democrats because we went to church." Mr. Harrison found out and immediately started documenting everything. Local business owner Maria Rodriguez stepped up to the microphone. "Thomas catered my daughter's quinceañera last year. Half my family wore MAGA hats, the other half wore Biden shirts. He treated everyone like family. That's who he really is." The police chief arrived, reviewing the security footage on a laptop. "We're seeing clear patterns of discriminatory behavior. Mr. Harrison's documentation is immaculate. Dates, times, witness statements. This isn't political anymore. It's a civil rights issue." Sarah's phone buzzed constantly as her social media followers jumped ship. Her latest post, defending her actions, had garnered mostly negative responses, with many former supporters expressing disappointment in her behavior. "My law firm has been contacted by 3 customers seeking to file discrimination complaints," announced attorney James Wilson. Mr. Harrison's business practices show a clear commitment to equality. Ms. Walker's actions, however, demonstrate textbook discriminatory behavior. The crowd parted as Sarah's former supervisor from her previous job arrived. "She was terminated from Main Street Cafe for similar behavior," he revealed, holding up employment records. "We have documentation of customer complaints about political harassment dating back 2 years." Thomas stood quietly by the bakery entrance, his MAGA hat now a symbol not of division, but of the right to personal expression without harassment. The security cameras continued recording as more community members arrived, their signs and testimonials painting a clear picture of a business owner who had built his success on genuine respect for all perspectives, contrasting sharply with the discriminatory behavior that had led to this moment. The town hall meeting room fell silent as Thomas stood at the podium, his MAGA hat placed carefully beside his prepared statement. The Business Association had called this emergency session to address workplace political tolerance, but it had become something much bigger. A business should be judged by how it treats everyone, not by the political beliefs of its owner, Thomas began, his voice steady. For 20 years, Cherrybrook Bakery has served every customer with respect, hired staff from all backgrounds, and created a welcoming environment for our community. That's the American dream I believe in. The projector flickered to life, showing a compilation of security footage. Sarah's confrontations with conservative customers played out in silent, damning sequence. An elderly veteran being turned away, a church group being mocked, regular customers being harassed for their political attire. Several attendees shook their heads in dismay. This isn't about left versus right, Thomas continued. It's about treating each other with basic human dignity. Sarah sat in the back row, her former confidence replaced by visible discomfort as her social media posts appeared on screen. Celebrating when she'd driven away conservative customers, planning confrontations, encouraging harassment, campaigns against local businesses. The Business Association president stepped forward. Based on the evidence presented, we're implementing new citywide guidelines for political expression and customer service. Cherrybrook Bakery will serve as our model for workplace inclusion. Later that week, Sarah's termination letter cited multiple policy violations, but Thomas had insisted on including information about local conflict resolution programs. Some called it too generous, but he remained firm. Breaking cycles of intolerance requires showing grace, he explained to reporters. The bakery flourished in the following months. Thomas launched an internship program focusing on workplace diversity, including political viewpoints. Several employees who had hidden their conservative beliefs began wearing their political gear proudly but respectfully. Even Sarah, after completing sensitivity training, wrote a reflective blog post about learning to separate political disagreements from human dignity. Local business groups adopted the Cherrybrook Standard for handling political differences in the workplace. Monthly community forums brought together people from across the political spectrum, using the bakery incident as a teaching tool for respectful dialogue. Sometimes it takes a small moment to teach a big lesson, Thomas reflected in a local newspaper feature. We can disagree without being disagreeable. That's what makes America work. The security cameras still rolled at Cherrybrook Bakery, but now they captured a different story. Conservatives and liberals sharing tables, campaign buttons next to pride flags, and a community learning that tolerance means accepting everyone, even those with whom we deeply disagree.